Good Gab, sponsored by Skillskin, a nonprofit organization empowering individuals with disabilities through employment. We're in the middle of summer heat, and it's happening because I'm melting today. But it doesn't matter because we have an amazing guest for you. Can't believe it. Publisher and author, If They Only Knew. This is Stephanie Regalado. Stephanie, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here live in Spokane.
Woo woo. Yeah. Well, what's happening in the world of Stephanie?
Oh, lots of things. Well, I'm grateful to be here. It's fun to have a chat that I'm not driving.
Right?
I appreciate that. I have my book that I recently published. It started right here in the heart of Spokane, our city, an experience that I had that about 6 months later, I was launching a women's magazine, Spokane Cornland Woman magazine. And I thought, I'm going to write about that experience anonymously and then ask others to do the same, because it was a moment where I wondered what the people around me would know.
Okay.
Like if they only knew what I was going through in that moment. And I put it in and published it, and it became an incredible obsession with our readers. It was the first thing they read. They tore through the stories, and the stories just poured in.
Well, because it's about you, right? So it's like, it's so authentic.
Well,
like people want those real stories.
They do. And the writers, the submissions came in that way, just very conversationally, very walking you through my experience that I had that I haven't maybe told anyone before. So it's very freeing and healing through the writing process. I believe so much in that. And then as well as reading it, there's so much healing. I mean, you think about when you are going through something, you want to feed yourself, whether it's a book or something else.
I mean, yeah, there's a reason why journaling exists, right? I'm thinking about my own self. When I've had some tough times, I'm like, just putting it on paper.
Yeah.
It's cathartic.
It is. Yeah. And actually, funny you mentioned journals, because that's how my little self-publishing journey began. I had lost a job, a big job. I had just signed a 6-figure contract a second time, and 2 weeks later they decided to fold the company.
That hurts.
Yeah, it was a zigzag, but I'm always like, think of the possibilities. It's okay. And I coached my team. I was an executive, I keep saying that, editor-in-chief of a national online platform that was associated actually with the Girl Scouts of the USA. It was their media arm for their alum.
Oh, wow.
And yes, it was very exciting, very cool work. And after that, I fell into a bit of a depression because I've always craved peace in the chaos of my work life.
Uh-huh.
But to actually have peace and make the adjustment into it is it's a whole different experience. And because I have had such visibility in my careers as editor-in-chief of magazines and attending a ton of events, especially in our region, and then having that national viewership as well, to just be myself floating on the lake that summer, trying to discover what I was going to do next, and realizing I didn't actually enjoy those 14-hour days and the 18-hour days and having to eat applesauce packets, because I had so much anxiety and sickness over what's coming next, because you never know what's coming next, especially digitally.
Sure.
Those analytics are coming in so swiftly. Sometimes
pivoting constantly.
Yeah. So every story is under the microscope of how it's performing. And as you're trying to climb, it was a fairly new endeavor for them. I came on at year 2.
Okay.
And so we were still on that high climb, and we were just starting to work with major movie producers and a lot of big companies across the nation. Super excited about that, because one of my favorite things to do is to work with companies who have so much of a marketing mindset that it skews them from the real true heart and just telling the story. They want to have the sale in.
Okay.
And so I don't like that approach at all.
It's not effective?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many messages coming at us that we're like, we have the Wonder Woman bands on these days, and we're reflecting.
True statement.
Yeah. So much of what that are coming at us. So if you just tell a story and move someone with your reason, but it's still associated with your work, and especially if it's mission-driven work, it's still it's supporting the why of it all the time.
We definitely found that here, working at Skillskin, being able to just tell the stories of who our employees were, how, work affected their life. It brought a lot of people involved. People wanted to get involved. They wanted to hear more. They wanted to see how they could help.
Yeah.
And I guess it wasn't surprising to me, but the amount of people it sure was. It's like, oh, we really touched a nerve.
Yeah, that's like the best problem a nonprofit can have. So that's amazing.
Heck yeah. So, okay, so you're at the lake. You're reinventing, rethinking yourself.
That's right. There was a story that was going on.
So what came out of that?
Well, after I was trying to decide, do I want to live the Apple Packet high figure job life, or
it's funny, it's trail mix is what I'm thinking for my own self. I can find it downstairs.
It's perfect. Anything light and nibbly that you can get in just to take the burn in the sense that you're being eaten from the inside out from all your worries and concerns. Well, I fell into a bit of a depression after that because I wasn't really sure if I wanted that. And then who am I and why aren't people pinging my phone every other minute? That was the other thing. The silence, I felt almost like I was erased instantly.
Wow.
Just gone. And it was such a strange thing.
You're with yourself.
Well, I am. And I'm a mom. I have 4 grown children. I have 2 little grandgirls. So people desiring and needing me and I have a lot of friends and I've got this great community. There's never been a lack of that. But I put so much value and so much of my personality and my character into the role of being the editor-in-chief of whatever it may be. I didn't know that. I thought I was fine. I was just Stephanie who did this. No, I was Stephanie who was that. And so having to extract that out of me and realize I'm still whole and complete and, cool and everything else all by myself. Even if no one on the planet knew I existed or that I write or I can tell good stories, I'm still okay and I still have purpose and worth.
Well, how powerful is that? I'm just thinking about that's a big problem that people who retire have, right? Yeah. So you've got the secret sauce. You're going to be set when it's time for you.
Right.
So now you're just impacting. And stories are part of it.
Right. So going back to the journal, I started thinking, how am I going to help myself through this space? Because I can't allow myself to be stuck in that paralyzation of not knowing what to do. It's like, come on, you're badass. You do all this stuff and everyone knows you and you go to do that. And I know myself to do that. And there's so much quiet. And I thought, you know what, writing it down, doing what I help other people do and telling stories and sharing really.
It's in your blood.
It's in my blood. So maybe I should just bleed it out a little bit of my own purpose. And I thought, I'm not the only one in the art of journaling. I hadn't really heard it as much. That back then was a couple of years ago. And I thought maybe I'll create a journal. You never know where these things.
Sure.
I had a friend and she's like, where did this come from? How did it? It was a need. Yeah. I wanted it. I wanted to do something pretty as well. Magic. And it was a white cover with just a black outline of a woman's face. And the title, of course, I named her Pearl because I really felt like putting that out there and seeing the response of it. So many people purchased that. Locally, it just started this whole thing. It was number 1 on Amazon for a bit of time.
Wow. You're like, what is happening?
And it was just kind of like I just shared my story, kind of an update of where I am, and then I had this book, this journal, and it went wild. And it just really helped me stand up to my next thing. And I had been working on this project, the If They Only Knew project, for many years, all through Spokane Coeur d'Alene Woman, carried it into Spokane Coeur d'Alene Living magazine when we merged all those sister publications. And I knew I wanted to make it a book early on. And an agent happened. It was, how serendipitous life really is.
I love that part of life.
When you just stay open and you're like, okay, I'll have the conversation. Just like with the Girl Scouts job. I was busy. Actually, Vince and Emily Bozzi had just passed away from COVID. And I stepped back in after having retired from that job 6 months before that. I stepped back in to be interim publisher. Yeah, Vince's family reached out to me, and I instantly dropped what I was doing and rushed back in. I was so focused on that. Someone reached out and they said, okay, I have this opportunity. You're the person for it. Someone I had met at a national business conference for women years before. And I'm like, I will always have a conversation. I was like, I have no time for this. No,
But
I
I'll be
will
there.
always have a conversation.
Yeah, you hear that, listener? Always have a conversation.
Always be open to the conversation. If you can trust yourself to stay true to yourself through any conversation, you can have any conversation that is presented to you. So many of us, it's true, we stop it before we have the opportunity to even pursue it all the way.
That's a fair statement.
Because we will talk ourselves out of it. And even through the book process, I know I'm jumping around a lot, but I always think of the people who, once they become successful or they have something they're proud of, they'll say something like, to all the people who said I couldn't or didn't believe in me, that's not my case at all. And if those people exist, I'd never listened or heard them enough to have it soak into me. I was the problem. My brain and all the voices in my head questioning it.
I understand that.
Do you really want to do this? Because even the journal project, sometimes it felt silly to me. It's just like kind of dreamy. I really enjoyed it. It was fun. Like you're just.
But when you put it out in the world, then other people see. And then,
right. And there probably were people who said, what is she doing? Or that's odd or weird. But I had to trust in myself. If I needed it and I liked it,
the others
there would be
too.
those and they will come to it. And you have to really let go of all those who you think may not like it or might think you're silly. I had to give that up long ago, being in a visible role and writing a monthly editorial for our community.
Right? That's pretty public.
It's very public, and I just always, the work I wanted to do was to help people understand one another better so they can soften and be open and less divisive. And I just wanted, because we're fractioned, of course, and I tend to feel a little more liberal-hearted, and it's a very conservative community, and I know that's kind of shifting, and people are readjusting their thoughts so they're not so singular. But back then, I really needed to speak to everyone and make everyone be moved and not bang them over the head with some ideal I had about rescuing a certain group they didn't like. No, you just tell the stories in the heart of my experiences, how I walk through our city. We worked downtown for a long time.
Yeah.
I love downtown, particularly back then. I haven't really been down there a lot, so I can't.
It's still beautiful.
I mean, our city is stunning. It's just beautiful, and it offers so much opportunity. It really is always what you choose to see in the direction you choose to go in. Same with the people who may like what you do or don't like what you do. It's all really about our focus and our vision and tuning out all the things, putting kind of bumpers along the way so you're preventing yourself from being blown like a leaf in the wind by all the other outside influences.
It's beautiful. There's a lot of lessons in there, Stephanie.
Right.
So where did this core, because there's a thread I keep hearing, it's empowering women through stories. Yeah. That's clear. That's what your book is. Those stories. Where's that come from? I mean, that's deep. It sounds like.
Well, I think once you've had a life that humbled you, and I had a childhood that was filled with lots of traumatic injustices for a child and for a family, and I knew it wasn't right, even though I was living it. I knew from a young age I didn't feel like I belonged in that, nor did I ever want to stay involved for long. But it humbled me because I've had pain and I've had hurt. I had a brother who took his life when we were in high school. I lost a baby brother when I was 12. He died of SIDS. I had another brother, and these are just the big ticket items. My parents were divorced. My dad was an ex-Green Beret, and he brought the war home with him. And the war was really passed on to our family. Yeah, and it's sad and crushing. Such a good man and such a loving heart. But when you're in war, you're at battle, and you can't step out of battle. And he just never could toward my mom, toward my stepmom, toward his children when they crossed him in any way. So there's just lots of stuff. and lots of pain that I've had to, I mean, all of us have pain, and just socioeconomic challenges. I was married, had all my babies, was divorced. I went right into another marriage far too soon. Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do it.
Pause, hold off, there's no rush. And medical insurance is not worth it, or whatever it may be. And that was strange in that period of time because I was so much myself through that. I felt I lost myself a little bit in the first marriage, and that's why I had to break up my family, which is something I said I would never do. But then I changed the dialogue in my head and said it's not a broken family, it's a two-home family. And we were so much better that way. I was freer, I wasn't bitter about certain things, and we were able to rebuild from there and have two healthy parents with a lot of healthy
kids.
Yeah, that was the goal. But in my second marriage, there was a lot of, I didn't finish my college education. I dropped out when I had my daughter, Isabella. I was which year? See, I can't even remember the years in school anymore. That's how uneducated I am. No.
Or how about, that's a moment ago.
It's just a snap ago. But I was in year 3, so I was a junior in college, and had my daughter, and I realized I could not leave this precious creature. It was such a strange phenomenon for me. And that was before digital and online classes.
The mom brain just held on.
Well, and that's the thing. I didn't ever even think about being a writer or want to be a writer. No way had I ever even thought I was
really
capable.
That came to you later?
It came to me as a tool of survival, which is a strange thing to say. But I had this baby. I'm like, what in the HE double hockey sticks can I do now? Because I still want to explore all the other parts of who I am and not just motherhood. I mean, you should never say just in front of motherhood, but
I understand.
There's the holistic being, and you really need to keep that balanced. And I was just sifting through jobs in the Spokesman because that's where they were back then. And I saw a job for a writer editor for a new little home remodeling guide that Byron King was launching. He's the publisher of Nostalgia magazine.
Okay.
He had In Construction.
Spokane royalty in publishing that.
Oh, yes. Yeah. In Construction magazine. He had a sports paper type newspaper as well for many years. And I called him. And actually, when I graduated from high school, I was going to play volleyball. And I could have played basketball. But I decided to ditch the region because the offers were all from the region. And I went to the East Coast.
You're like, I'm out.
I became a nanny. Yeah, there's another theme in all this. She jets the heck out. You don't stay and fix it. You just go. Give yourself time.
Hey, I like that that way.
Yeah.
Feels real close to home.
Right. And while I was there, I, as a nanny, and the families were gone so long, the long days, I just started writing notes for them because I still felt, I told my parents I wanted to be a mom when I was 10. They were very concerned about me. So the fact that I waited until I was 26 was just a celebratory thing for anyone who knew me through my early years. But I felt the heart, and the moms are gone in the family, and I wanted them to know. Plus, their kids are just so incredibly easy to delight in. So I would write these stories out. And then I came back to Spokane and did the same for a family here. And they're like, you are a brilliant storyteller. They loved these. And then I couldn't go a day without writing one, no matter what it was like, because they just so craved it. And so I had that in my head. Someone said I was a brilliant writer, even though it's such news to me.
When someone saw something in you didn't see in yourself.
Yeah, I never would have thought that. And also, I didn't have a lot of infusion of what was positive about me and my positive qualities through school, certainly not on the educational side. I struggled in math. I didn't even know I was good at math until I went to college. And I was like, oh my God, how did I get this smart in the last 12 months from graduating high school to going to college? Because my math instructor was recommending that I switch my focus to mathematics.
You're like, what is happening?
I'm not good at math. Let me show you my high school transcripts. So I called Byron and just had a conversation. He said, based on your personality, I really think you should come in and let's just chat. And it's really been that personality that's gotten me into so many places because people are always like,
well, you're really easy to talk to. So
And I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on. But so I met with him the next day, and he said, bring any writing samples you might have. And I brought him a couple of little stories about these children through their days. And he's like, well, you're not a bad writer. Love your personality. Like, I don't want to miss out on this train or whatever is going to happen here. And he gave me the job.
Wild.
And from there, every person who reached out to me to potentially work with me, I never said no, ever. Even when it was so painful not to say, I had no time. I was still a mom. At one point I had my last, so I had an infant too at sometimes. So there were times where I had made like a nest in my lap because she was having a fussy night and I had to do work.
To just go after it.
Yeah, because I knew if I ever missed a deadline too, I was not going to be, if you're not reliable, people will not rely on you. And so that fizzles out really quickly, those people reaching out. And then Vince Bozzi and I connected, and he's like, if you ever need any work at all, any extra work, anything, I'm here for it. And I'm like, what do you have? 0 time. 0 time. It was pure madness that I would say that. And then he gave me this huge project, writing actually little history pieces on all these different businesses that had been in Spokane 75 plus years. So cool. And I took it on. It was phenomenal. I had some really fun moments where I walked.
I read some of that, by the way.
You?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Did you like it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I
it's a risky question.
I love, the origins of Spokane, right?
Yeah.
And some of those families, they're just trying to, make it and then did.
Yeah.
And are still scraping by. It's like, I love that.
Yeah. I really built my career on writing about businesses.
Was Huppins in that? Do I remember that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
How could they not be? That would be a travesty. But I lost my train of thought.
Yeah,
riding my way through life.
Well, it's because you're so interesting. And as this, I'm really curious though, like how the book developed, because you put it out there. Did you ask people to bring stories back, or what was the genesis of that?
Yeah, when I published that first anonymous column, it was my story that I experienced that made me think of the whole thing. And then I published it anonymously and asked for anonymous submissions.
Okay, I didn't catch that part.
For moments in a woman's life where she wondered what the people around her would think if they only knew what she was carrying. And the stories they run quite the range. There's financial challenges. You get a new job. They're sending you on a trip, and they expect you to turn in your receipts.
Sure.
And there's like, where are you getting the money to buy the stuff, to have the receipts, and trying to work out how you navigate those really difficult situations. And so really, and I say this a lot in the book and even on the cover, it celebrates the power and perseverance of women. And all the stories some of them are really emotional. They all have an emotional component to them. But
yeah, because they're personal.
They're really personal. And a lot of them are stories people haven't told and shared with others. So, but they're on the other side of it, and they're able to look back and see that was actually a source of power for them, and they can carry that forward.
To make it to the other side of whatever situation was happening at the time.
And you don't even just make it.
Talk more about that.
Linear.
That's very my brain, right? Yeah, the linear thinking.
Well, no, because I always think of life as an elevation. My son played video games when he was younger, and you're all about leveling up in video games. So we started taking that verbiage on. I started taking it as a mom, and then it just went everywhere. Like, think of opportunities to level up. I'd always tell my kids and even friends, if you feel nervous about something, an opportunity, it is an opportunity to level up, and that is your body preparing you for the next big thing, the next big iteration, or even a small step. Even small steps can be very nerve-wracking, but it is a step, and it's never linear. If you are staying open to yourself, we're always learning and growing. So even if we feel
through setbacks, through accomplishment, through all things.
Yeah, even if we feel like we've fallen a hole, because a lot of times when people are...
Yeah, who hasn't been there?
Yeah, when you feel like it's more like probably you may have tripped, but it's not a hole even though you stayed down a little while. But there's a little hill on the other side of it. It's not flat. So whatever you go through, And there's so much healing in it when you can think on to the source of power that you had to rely on to get through that moment. Even when it was so fuzzy at the time, you didn't know that you even had power. You were just surviving, barely making it through. Survival is power. Survival is you making the choice to get up the next day, to take the shower. It always breaks my heart when people talk about houseless individuals and like, why don't they just go get a job? And there's so many jobs. When I was depressed, I didn't want to shower in my own home and pull myself together to have a conversation about how great I was going to show up for this company. And to be houseless, having to find access, first of all, to all the things to help you feel okay about yourself. And then going to
giant hill to climb.
Yeah, it's like, it's almost an impossible request without support. I feel that way.
Definitely believe that.
And so my version, I guess, of support for women in particular, and even men through other stories that I've done, is my source of support is helping them really tap into what the story was that they experienced, being a safe place where they can share it. So many adults, so many people do not feel like they're writers, and they're not confident enough to even put themselves out there that way. That's so risky. Being adult is like 1,000% risk all the time. Because you never lose that. You don't want to look silly, or you could be the CEO of something. Although some of them, they lose that. They could really use it. Get back that.
I know when I hit send all to our company, it's like there's a tickle in there every time.
Yeah. So just helping people feel like they're not alone. And when we're able to do that, and particularly through these stories where there's a source of shame often when it's a story we don't want to tell someone. It's like, why is that? Why are you not sharing that and releasing it? Because often there's something shameful about it because you've made it mean something unpleasant about yourself, and that maybe you are not, maybe you're broken. And people say that a lot. I'm broken. I don't ever believe in that. I think we're always, there's some collapse and regeneration and everything.
Thank goodness.
Right. Hallelujah. But you cannot have collapse without regeneration on the other side, because that's just not how evolution.
Yeah, look how nature
living
works.
Things work. Yeah, so you really have to trust it's going to happen. And once they can feel empowered by that, even if it's through anonymously sharing it, they walk through their story, they release it, they see it, they hear reactions to people reading it. You don't even have to have that side of it to feel a little less alone. And then when you read them, there's a couple of stories in there that may be considered scandalous, and the woman did it to herself. And I'm sure some people are probably like, oh my God, like that, I would never do that. How could you do that? She's horrible.
But some people might read the same story and feel like, hey, this looks a lot like me too.
Right. I mean, I always say this, we all have the same spectrum of possibility as far as humans go. We're all human.
I like that vision.
There's the same spectrum of possibility in us, and we're all just on that line at different places, but we're all on the same line. So even when it's really horrendous activity we could think of, we still have that capability in us. It's not like, even when it comes to murder and awful things, it's just a choice away. It's just a lack of resistance. Yeah. I mean, not just, I don't want to downplay the magnitude of really bad decisions, but
a true possibility for every single one of us.
Right. You're not better than someone else because they made choices that you look down upon. I mean, good for you that you were in a situation and your life didn't drive you to a spot where you ended up making that decision, because I really do also believe heavily in upstream work, of course. I love
because you like making an impact. Yeah.
Well, and I like not just putting Band-Aids on things. I like people to actually feel, and I really, most of all, love the idea of starting from birth with humans. So there isn't so much recovery throughout your life. And I'm just going to sound like a bleeding heart, but if you don't provide support systems to ensure that kids grow up with stability and the basic needs, like we were talking about, houseless people, whatever, children are going to school hungry or with dirty clothes, and they heard horrific fights and such. I experienced that a little bit, not really hunger, but with horrific, awful fights. This is probably publicly. There was a time when my dad and my stepmother got in a fight, and they broke out over 40 windows in our house.
Ugh.
There were times,
Traumatic.
Yeah, there were times, and I was the oldest, so I always took my brothers in and kind of hid them away and told them everything's going to be okay. And so I guess that started.
Being the
too.
shield comes with a price.
It does. It does. And I'm dealing with that now. I still have that's the voices in your head. It's like suddenly when you're doing something that's not directly like, look at me with my sheet around these people. It's just me doing this. No sheet. Then I know some people will say, you're so confident. And I don't necessarily think it's confidence. I've just had to accept who I am and just be true to that and walk forward through life.
And now helping others. Have you heard back from some of the people who submitted those stories back to you?
Yeah.
What was some of the impact for them?
It can bring me to tears of how grateful they are, especially in the moments where they've shared their story with me and I've written it for them, or they needed a heavier lift with the polishing of their piece, and I was able to polish it. And they said I put the words in their mouth they didn't even have or know really that they could use to make it even more of a beautiful experience, even through trauma. You could see the strength in that person and how she survived it and got through it and held it all this time. There was one woman who had heard that a very traumatic assault by several boys in her high school. She was in high school at the time. But she learned later on, she's married and has a family, that there was a tape of it. There was some sort of a recording, and that someone had known of this recording and told her about it, reached out to her. And her husband didn't know, her family never knew. She never said anything to anyone about that she had been brutally attacked and assaulted by these boys in really horrific ways. And when she wrote that, I wrote back and I said, we can't leave it at this. We can't just leave this. You can't stay in the space of suffering. And I asked her what kind of relationship she has with her husband and if she felt that she could really, truly rely on him to be fully vulnerable because he could be one of her best advocates. Like, just start there, start in the home. And she just said she didn't know because she's never spoken about it. But now I said, but it's swirling and it's in you and you're showing up in front of all these people who love you and you still have it and it's torture. And later on, she wrote me and said that she did share it with him and he got right on it, and they were pursuing, they had to contact the authorities and were pursuing whatever justice could be done at that juncture. So that was,
wow.
That was a powerful experience. And the other thing is, whenever I'm speaking in front of groups, sometimes I look out at the audience and they're kind eyes, but sometimes it's hard to read an audience, especially when I'm weaving in and out of stories. And I always share personal stories, and they rarely are like these amazing stories about myself and what I've experienced. So they know I'm a real human. I'm squishy and disturbed sometimes. So I cry a lot, and
my kind of people.
But afterwards they'll wait to buy a book or just to say thank you or whatever. And they will, I can't count how many women just share a little story.
Like the snippet.
It's just a snippet. Yeah. They say they appreciate so much about the book and what it means to them, just knowing those stories could be released and that I could also be a really safe space for that to happen.
Well, is this project going to continue
Yes,
if they only knew too?
Oh, yeah. It's
like volumes.
Right. And I have a teen one in process. I have a men's version in process. A lot of men throughout the years have always come up to me because they were familiar.
I'll throw you some anonymous stories.
There you go.
Got me inspired.
And that's good because it's so good. And men would say, can you do this for men? And I'm like, I don't think that's my place. And I don't want to step into it. If a male wanted to, then I would. But I've been more unleashed on that side where if it's asked of me and it's trusted of me and it's needed, then absolutely I will show up to make that happen.
You can hold that space for someone.
Yeah.
Without judgment and just caring.
Yeah.
It's pretty special.
They're really just caring. And the thing I hope most about this book is it really helps without a name. It's not Stephanie's story except the first one, because I've been very clear about that. But you don't have a name to put it on. And I was interviewed for a story or an article a while ago, and they asked me, well, like, that's always the question, why anonymous? And because I had an agent and she shopped it around for a year, and a lot of the traditional publishers were very interested in it, but they did not like the anonymous nature. And they wanted me to put fake names on them, at least. And I was just adamant no, because that makes it Sarah's story or Rebecca's story or someone else's story.
Rebecca. Yeah.
Right. It's not Rebecca. And B, I don't want you to have a name, because having someone's identity puts another layer between you and the experience. And I feel like if you remove that layer of it's Stephanie's story or Sarah's story, whatever, you have to sit in it more and experience it more for yourself without your brain immediately putting up a layer saying it's someone else's story. When I said that to her, she goes, oh my God, you're right. Because when I was reading your book, I knew another story was yours because it was something I had shared in another capacity. And she goes, and I immediately thought, it's Stephanie's story. She goes, I immediately had to put your name on it and probably did experience it differently. So I was adamant about that, and they passed. And then after a year, my agent said, you're a smart woman. You've been in publishing and writing and all that jazz. Make it happen. Get your first book out, and then we'll go from there and see. But there's a book too, of course, in the works. And another exciting project is a book to accompany the whole series, where it helps readers, particularly women, for this first book. It helps them walk through their experiences. It helps them really explore some of those kind of plot point moments, perhaps, in their life that have created meanings about themselves. It could have been something that happened to them totally out of control, but the way that it happened to them, you question yourself about why that happened. I have this really horrible story, of course, queen of horrible stories, but I mean, I'm okay. But as a young girl, 3, we had a family friend staying in the house, and my brother was sleeping on the sofa. It was just those 2 kiddos. And he walked me into the restroom, and there's a moment where he's asking me to do something unsavory. And I can remember the cold tub against my back and how that felt and how my brain was racing. And then my only memory after that is having the candy. It's so bad. It's not funny. But it's like I was in counseling for, I'm like, help me do what you have to do to extract this. I have to know. I'm like, why do you have to know? Your body protected you. Your mind protected you. You don't have to know. All you have to know is that you got through it and you're okay. And that's disgusting and sick. And it's horrible that it happened to you, but so you let that go. But there were times when I was thinking about,
you can?
Yeah, there are times, but early on there were times where I questioned myself as a 3-year-old.
Yeah, which is
like, why didn't you, can you like fought or cried or screamed or got crazy? You were calm, and I only remember calmness and then the lollipop. And so
my wife and I were having conversations not a month ago. She was talking about some of those inflection points of her life, and that like really created some deep-seated meaning for her. The story she was telling about herself that, wasn't the best view of herself.
Right.
And damn it, I was one of those inflection points too. I was
good to learn that,
man.
isn't it? Yeah, right.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay.
But it's good to look back on those moments and walk through it. And the workbook has a spot.
It's going to help through that.
It does, because it's through storytelling. It's like healing through storytelling, because you're telling the story. It extracts the story first, and remembering like you were pressed up against this cold tub. You felt that, and you can bring yourself back into that moment, and even the reader, if it ends up being a published story someday. And then you explore what that made you question about yourself or make meaning about who you are and your character and all that. your susceptibility to be a victim. That's another thing, because of surrounding victimhood, there's so many concerns and questions about it that aren't empowering to victims. Being questioned at all is not empowering. It's so disempowering. It's like being re-brutalized. But you get to explore that, and then you get to look at it as if your best friend told you that same story about herself. And that makes me want to tear up a little bit, because what would you have said to her? If that happened to my best friend and she told me that story, I would never have thought any of the things I question about myself, but I would have infused her with the power and strength I saw that she carried through and developed in those moments. And so it brings them through to that, and then it helps you rewrite the story and the narrative, embracing those thoughts that you just spoke. So I'm excited. Powerful. About that. I'm excited about that.
Well, me too. Now I'm excited. I know our readers are excited. Well, Stephanie, man, I can't believe it. This has been such a good conversation. Like, so thankful for you sharing with us. Everybody, if they only know, better look it up. Where can they find this?
Well, it's at the Auntie's bookstore in downtown Spokane, heart of our city, where the whole project started. So it's I love sending people there, but it's also, of course, on the big .coms, Amazon, Barnes.
You can find it everywhere.
All the places. You can just type in if they only knew or Stephanie Regalado.
Well,
it'll pop up.
I know you're working real hard on what you just described, this handbook, this accompaniment, but please keep going, because it sounds like you're going to help a lot of people, and that's awesome.
Well, it helps me. Yeah. So I have to trust on it. If it's helping me, I might as well share it.
Stephanie, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.